stay with all of you throughout the webinar. Before we formally begin the webinar, allow me a few minutes to share the webinar norm with all participants. Hopefully, it will make it easier for everyone to engage in the topic and get most out of it. Let me share with you, as a participant, you will have restricted rights. You can only see and listen to the presenters and see how many other participants have joined the webinar. Communication is only possible through chat window. Kindly refrain from using the chat room just to socialize, because side chats then become a distraction for our speakers. We request you to raise your hand and wait for your turn, or write your question in the chat box, and please ask questions concisely. We as a host will follow the chat box during the presentation. If there are questions of general interest, we will ask the speaker to answer them directly after the presentation for everyone. All the other remarks and questions will be sent to the speaker as a protocol and will be answered later on. Please leave your name, organization name, your designation, and email address along with your question. Cameras for speakers and guests and moderators will be on only. For the moment, we are recording this webinar. Everything will be available later on our Facebook page and other MRC social media platforms. Link to access this conference recording will be sent to the registered participants only. We also recommend you using hashtag MRC Pakistan on Twitter during this conference. And we encourage that you all go to our official Twitter page and retweet with hashtag MRC Pakistan. Dear ladies and gentlemen, it gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all to this webinar to celebrate International Migrants Day 2020. Every year, this day is celebrated to highlight and recognize the efforts, contribution, and rights of migrant workers worldwide. Dear participants, the COVID-19 outbreak has affected migration trends at large. There is rising antagonism toward immigrants in many countries, especially in the COVID-19 pandemic. Realizing the social and economic growth of migration and ensuring the success of migration policy reform based on understanding of how public opinions are formed and shaped. These opinions can be shaped by well-communicated facts using effective communication policies, by institutions working on migration, and also by using social, electronic, and print media. Often these perceptions and attitudes are based on flawed assumptions, misperceptions, prejudice, and fear, rather than based on evidence and facts. Today, through this conference platform, we are going to discuss how migration is perceived in Pakistan and main destination countries, and also shifting trends of immigration after COVID-19. This conference has been organized in partnership with Gender Studies Department, University of Punjab, and Labour and Human Resource Department, Government of Punjab. We are very thankful to our partners for their cooperation in making this webinar a success. My special thanks go to our honorable guests, speakers, and online participants for their time and participation. So now, without further ado, I would now request Ms. Rana Raheem, Icmpd Country Coordinator for Pakistan, to welcome all participants and formally open the webinar for all of us. Rana, now the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nadia. On behalf of Icmpd, I would like to welcome all of you and thank you for joining us today to celebrate International Migrants Day. I would also like to extend a special welcome to Ms. Rana Malik, head of the Department of Gender Studies at the University of Punjab, and our guest of honor, Mr. Mohammed Majid Iqbal from the Department of Labour and Human Resource Development. And of course, a warm welcome to our distinguished panelists. International Migrants Day is a day when we celebrate the important role of migrants globally, how migrants enrich our societies, in the societies in which they live through their knowledge, skills, and hard work. And we also celebrate their contributions to the economic development of their home countries through the transfer of skills, their earnings, and investments. The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the critical role of migrant workers in sustaining the healthcare, transportation, agricultural systems, and food services in host countries during lockdowns. During the last few months, migrants have visibly been at the forefront of the fight against the current health pandemic. However, migrants have rarely been recognized for their positive contributions. Their skills are often undervalued and their rights undermined. The current pandemic has also had a disproportionate effect on migrants through job losses, lack of access to healthcare, discrimination, which often rises during times of crisis. We've seen millions of migrants globally, and hundreds of thousands of migrants in Pakistan, or Pakistani migrants rather, forced to return to their countries of origin where they were stranded, often without income or shelter, unable to return home due to the COVID-19 related mobility restrictions. And we have to remember that often these migrants tend to live and work in crowded conditions that do not enable them to comply with physical distancing, putting them at increased risk of contracting the virus. Icmpd recognizes that the challenges and difficulties of international migration can only be addressed through enhanced cooperation and collective action, and by changing the negative perceptions about migration that are not based on evidence, as Nadia pointed out, or supported by facts. Icmpd is an international intergovernmental organization active in more than 90 countries worldwide. It was created with a commitment to making migration and the mobility of people orderly, safe, and regular through research, migration dialogues, and capacity building. In Pakistan, Icmpd has been active for a number of years, been managing one of the key flagship projects of Icmpd in Pakistan are the two Migrant Resource Centers, one in Islamabad, which is being managed in collaboration with the Ministry of Overseas Pakistanis and Human Resource Development, the one in Lahore in close cooperation with the Department of Labor, Punjab. The Migrant Resource Centers, or MRCs, raise awareness on safe migration pathways and the risks of irregular migration to ensure that departing and aspiring migrants make informed decisions during all stage migration cycle. The MRCs counsel individuals seeking work and study opportunities abroad, access to education systems in countries of destination, the rights and responsibilities of migrants, as well as skills development and vocational training programs. The MRCs hold information sessions at educational institutes like the University of Punjab, technical and vocational training institutions, schools, and also raise awareness at the local level through community outreach and information sessions, either through local government structures or community-based organizations. We are very pleased to announce that Icmpd and the government of Pakistan recently signed an agreement of cooperation, which will allow us to further strengthen our collaboration with the Department of Labor in Punjab. We hope that on this International Migrants Day, the role of migrants can be recognized for the positive contributions they offer all societies, whether it's host countries or their countries of origin. Icmpd will continue to work towards this goal through our work in migration dialogues, research and capacity building in partnership with governments, research institutions, institutions such as yours, and international organizations, and civil society. Now, I look forward to hearing from the excellent panel of speakers we have with us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rana, for your wonderful words. Now, may I request our academia partner, Ms. Rana Malik, Head of Department Gender Studies, University of the Punjab, to share a few words with the participants. Rana, you may please unmute your mic and share a few words on International Migrants Day with all of us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum to everyone. I'm very happy to be part of this prestigious panel today, and I wish all the participants here a very to celebrate the International Migration Day. So it's really a pleasure to be part of this celebration today. And I welcome all the participants, particularly the students who have joined us on behalf of the Department of Gender Studies, University of the Punjab, to this international conference. So I'm looking forward to listen to the esteemed panelists we have today, and probably it will be definitely very informative and a way forward towards the challenges faced by migrants, particularly living in Pakistan. As already been said by Nadia and Rana, we have the same names. So I also feel that the migrants, particularly who live in a different country, for example, like in Pakistan, we have Afghan refugees here living for so many years, but still they are going. They face the problem of identity here. They face problem in finding jobs here. They're mostly doing the daily, working on daily wages, which in the COVID situation in this particular year, we have seen that that would have definitely brought more trouble to these people. Definitely. So as I said, that they have problems in finding work. Although now, in some of the situations, we see some of the networking between these migrant living here, but it's not that much strong, and particularly they don't have any networking with the government, importantly, to provide them some kind of relief. So they have issues when with their health problems, with the education they can get in the host country, and particularly how they can manage their living. So and it becomes more when we talk about women, because men can also can go out, they can meet with the people, they can do things, but for the women, definitely it becomes more vulnerable. As we see that women are already on the margin side, but when they are a refugee in a country, it becomes more vulnerable situation. So in university, like we are doing researches on the issues, challenges faced by particularly Afghan women in the situation they are living. So recently, we have MPhil thesis on this. The other women living, Afghan women living in Lahore, particularly, and what kind of challenges they are facing. So, as I said, it was not to my surprise when I saw the issue. They are even not able to get the basic health facilities in a city like Lahore, which is definitely a big metropolitan city. But so you can imagine what could happen to these people when they live in other small suburbs or areas. So even in a big city, they are having there is definitely a need. I would like to point out that we need to have more research on this topic, because it's an area which is not being so much under our concerns, and maybe I don't know why it is so, but recently we have seen a kind of awareness among people on this issue. So probably it's because of the organizations like yours that the awareness is being spread out. So there is a need definitely to dig more about the people facing challenges here, and to do research and to see what kind of challenges they are facing. And also importantly, as Rana said, that there is a need for awareness also. It's for all of us, that we usually don't um, uh, talk about the issues faced by these people, because like probably we don't see them as someone facing some kind of issues, because we are at a at more you can say a kind of we are more probably we don't see them as people, as humans facing any issues. We see ourselves only, we see our problems, we see our issues, but we don't actually think of these people. So there is a need for awareness that these people also exist, and we should appreciate the contributions made by these people, because these are the ones who usually do more hard work, more tough jobs than the people in the host country. And as you have seen in other countries, like in the Gulf, particularly in the Middle East countries, the people from Pakistan, they are doing more tough jobs there. But when it comes to the wages, when it comes to the facilities, when it comes to the other things, they are the ones who are more marginalized on the side, on this side. So we facilitate the host country, particularly facilitates its own population, the people, and they don't see the miseries faced by the migrants living there. So there's definitely a need to have a massive kind of awareness among the masses, that we must appreciate, we must see that what kind of work they are doing and how we can facilitate, because they are the ones who are explaining the foundations of the country, and the work which we don't like to do. I would like to say this, that the work which we see more tough and we don't like to be into this. As like in Europe, we have seen, and I have met people, my postdoctorate was on gender and migration. So I have seen people who are doing the kind of work which probably the Norwegians don't want to do. You know, washing their washrooms, cleaning their ships, and doing, very these kind of work. In this case, we must go down doing is the work which nearly a country needs. So I would like to highlight two important things. As I said, the research, which definitely needs to be publicized, and people must know that what challenges they are facing on the ground, definitely. And a massive awareness campaign we have, like on the media, through universities, in the colleges, in the schools, and everywhere. So that we would appreciate that, yes, the contribution these people are making in the countries they are living in. To listen to my esteemed panelists about their experiences they have and the researches they have done on these issues. And I'm again very thankful to the Migrant Resource Centre that they have given us an opportunity to be a partner in this international conference. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rana, for your time and words. It's a great pleasure for us to share the message of our government partner, Mr. Iqbal, Honorable Additional Secretary, Labour and Human Resource Department, Government of Punjab, to commemorate the International Migrants Day. May I request my colleague Maria to play his message for us?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you everyone for joining us today at this virtual platform. Today, observing the International Migrants Day, I humbly pay tribute to all my industrious, diligent, and hardworking Pakistani migrant workers who leave their homeland and families in search of better economic opportunities. COVID-19 has affected the global mobility at large. Hard hit from this pandemic is received by our labor migrants. Realizing this fact, our top priority and focus is economic recovery and sustainable reintegration of Pakistani labor migrants by improving their skills and placing them back in the international market. Government is working and developing the projects that provide solution to the challenges being faced by aspirant migrant workers at home in Pakistan as well as abroad. We would like to prepare them better to deal with these challenges nationally and internationally. All migrants are entitled to equal protection of their human rights. As such, as we benefit from their social, cultural, and economic factors, we still need to work on awareness raising of labor rights to reduce workers' exploitation within Pakistan as well as abroad. It is a need of the hour to help people to make informed decisions when considering migration and emphasize the importance of correct information to avoid irregular migration. I appreciate the work and would like to thank International Centre for Migration Policy Development and Migrant Resource Centre Lahore team for putting efforts together with the University of Punjab and Labour and Human Resource Department in bringing the experts from all the sectors working on migration on this virtual platform. It is a great accomplishment in itself. I conclude by saying, as we mark this day, our call is for migration to be safe, regular, and dignified for all in origin as well as destination countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. Now we formally conclude our opening ceremony. I'm thankful to our honorable guests and partners for making this event a success. So now moving toward our sessions, I would like to share with you that generally people are poorly informed about migrants and are easily manipulated by the alarmist narrative of far-right mindset. Therefore, instead of acknowledging the increasing diversity, recognizing how it could enrich our societies, people see migrants as an external. Studies have shown that host societies alienate them and consider migrants as a threat to the existing social order. Crises usually shape public attitude toward migration. Thus, it is important for us to consider how these perceptions are shaped and what they influence in the longer run. Now, moving forward toward our first session, our first speaker is from CIMRAD, Center on International Migration, Remittances and Diaspora, Ms. Maham Hameed. She's a research fellow at the Graduate Institute of Development Studies. Her primary research field is economic history of Pakistan, migration, and diaspora. Today, she will share with us her combined research study, which she has conducted along with Dr. Nasir, Iqbal, to view the official and unofficial channels through which the marginalization of migrant workers occur and is likely to intensify in the post-COVID-19 situation. She especially looked into the Gulf countries in this regard. At the level of the civil societies over there, there's a blatant anti-migrant sentiments that manifest in terms of slogans, stigmatization, and stereotyping. In the most recent years, such sentiments have been expressed by several government authorities too. So now, without further taking much time, may I invite Ms. Maham to share her research work with all of us. Maham, you have 20 minutes from now, and afterward, the floor will be open for question and answer for further 10 minutes.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nadia, for this wonderful introduction. You definitely saved me some time. And I would like to thank MRC for this wonderful opportunity, and especially Ms. Nadia and Ms. Javelia for excellent coordination throughout this process. Just want to quickly ask if everyone can see my slides. Okay, lovely, great. So I'd skip the introductions part, but I'd just like to, okay, great. So I'd just like to emphasize that this presentation today that I did as part of the CIMRAD, Center on International Migration, Remittances and Diaspora, which is housed in Lahore School of Economics. So first and foremost, we're going to look at the attitudes of the government of Pakistan towards the migrants. So anyone who follows Syed Zulfikar Bukhari, the Special Assistant to the Prime Minister for Overseas Pakistanis and Human Resource Development, has a fair idea regarding the views held by the Pakistani government regarding migrants. So the enthusiastic recognition of contributions and achievements of overseas Pakistanis, words of encouragement for migrants in times of crisis, and the hopeful statistics regarding remittances represent the general attitude of Pakistani state towards its overseas migrants. Such tweets basically are reflective of the stance taken by the incumbent Prime Minister, who has hailed the migrants as the greatest asset of the Pakistani economy countless times. From appeals for funds facilitation services for the flow of remittances, and efforts for safe return of stranded workers due to the pandemic, migrants have remained quite central for the policy making of the current government. However, this phenomenon is not new. For the last 4 decades at least, migrants have made very important contribution to the economy of Pakistan, and the government has been very quick to recognize migrant remittances are a vital part of the Pakistan's economy, in the sense they're extremely crucial for meeting Pakistan's current account deficit needs. So in 2019, for example, remittances constituted a share of some studies, such as by Irfan, also suggest a negative correlation between poverty and remittances. So showing that the incidence of poverty falls as the flow of remittances increase at least in the case of Pakistan. So the attitude of state during the pandemic towards migrants is an attestation to the facilitative role acquired by the government. Pakistan started the repatriation of stranded workers in the Gulf as early as March, April. So the government tested returning migrants and quarantined them as required. So according to a report by the State Bank of Pakistan, the government repatriated around 90,000 workers in the period between April to June. Migration in Pakistan. So in early 1970s, with the oil prices boom and the sudden surge in the demand for labor by the Gulf states, migration from Pakistan, though in extremely large numbers and in a very steady kind of flow, remained extremely informal and private. So before government of Pakistan started taking note of the started basically facilitating migrants, an ad hoc network of friends and families developed, and not just friends and family, but also agents and sub-agents who started facilitating migration. So addressing this gap, the government of Pakistan came up with the Immigration Ordinance in 1979. So the ordinance kind of addressed major aspects to regulate and facilitate migration. It emphasized the provision of pre-departure orientation and guidance to departing migrants. And it also addressed the licensing and operations for overseas employment promoters. Sorry. And also kind of circumscribed the penalties for these OEPs in case of failure to abide by these rules set by the government. So then the national immigration, so basically this ordinance, followed by periodic amendments, has guided migration in Pakistan until present. Some recent efforts have been made to formulate a formal policy of migration that are worth noting. In 2009, a draft national immigration policy was formulated under the guidance of newly elected government. However, the draft was neither proposed nor debated or approved in the parliament. A more recent attempt was made in 2013 to formulate a national policy for overseas Pakistanis by the Ministry of Overseas Pakistanis and the ILO. The draft proposal took a rights-based approach in order to improve the well-being of migrants in general. Of recent, Pakistan has also developed various institutions and established rules to regulate the recruitment process. The Ministry of Labour, Manpower and Overseas Pakistanis, for example, has appointed a community welfare attaches in selected countries to oversee the employment conditions and welfare of Pakistani workers abroad. A complaint cell for overseas Pakistanis was established by the Ministry for the resolution of grievances through the Overseas Pakistani Foundation, or the OPF. So OPF also administers a range of services for the benefit of migrant workers, including pre-departure briefings, remittance card scheme, vocational training, welfare funds, and pension schemes. Furthermore, bilateral labor agreements have been concluded with the number of receiving countries. And Pakistan is also a member of the Colombo process, which is a region to discuss and share experiences and best practices on overseas employment and contractual labor, with the view of optimizing the developmental benefits of migration. So as far as the upskilling of migrant workers is concerned, a National Vocational and Technical Training Commission was established in 2005 with the express purpose of enhancing the skills and improving marketability of workers. A national skills strategy was established in 2009, the result of which was formation of various chapters in the 4 provinces. So a consultation report by the government of Pakistan issued in 2014 showed that even though progress has been made on this front, there were only an estimated of 8% of all workers that had received any training at all. And much of the training that was received was, so you see, although efforts are being taken by the government on the issue of upskilling of migrant workers, there's really some very strong gaps. So apart from government, the agents and promoters also play a major role in the migration process. However, a lot of violations take place at this point. Although OEPs are government approved and in theory closely supervised, there are massive breaches of protocols at their end. Firstly, as a study by Dr. G.M. Arif showed, they work with a network of agents and sub-agents who connect the migrant to the promoter. So even though that is illegal, so even though the presence of sub-agents and agents in this process is illegal, this practice is still very rampant. Secondly, these agents and promoters confiscate the passports and other legal documents that the migrant represents. So lastly, they also misrepresent the contract modalities, such as the nature of the job or the expected salary. And the migrant is really caught by surprise when he actually lands up in the job and when he actually enters the Gulf states. So now moving on to the geography and the occupational profile of migrants from Pakistan. From the total flow of migration outflows, 95% of the migrant workers from Pakistan migrate to the Gulf. Within the Gulf, there's a high concentration of Pakistani workers in Saudi Arabia and the UAE. And as you can see from the table, together Saudi Arabia and UAE constitute 87% of the total share of migrant workers from Pakistan, of course. And half of all labor migrants from Pakistan continue to fall in the category of unskilled and semi-skilled workers. Unskilled and semi-skilled workers are often employed in the riskiest jobs, most vulnerable to abuse, and often determines the level of discrimination and negative attitudes that these workers have to face. So according to an upcoming research by Dr. Françoise Belair, there's a clear hierarchization of workers in the Gulf. So in her study of the rare statistics available regarding the occupational and national profiles of migrant workers in the Gulf, she shows that the workers' occupation and skills levels diverge significantly by the nationality group. So in Dubai, in 2011, for instance, the 3 upper occupation categories concentrated 94% of all Western nationalities residing in the Gulf and 60% of all foreign Arab nationals. By contrast, 23% of Asians only perform the managerial and professional occupations. And 61% actually of them were in blue-collar jobs. So clearly showing that the occupational profile of the migrant workers in the Gulf are very closely linked to the nationalities of these migrant workers. And she also showed similar statistics and trends from Bahrain and Kuwait. So, right. So nationality is undoubtedly the most important and most formalized way. Foreigners, without certain exceptions, cannot acquire the citizenship in the Gulf. Recently, there have emerged some schemes for permanent residence of skilled workers in the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar. However, the reality for the vast majority of unskilled and skilled workers in the Gulf is that of impermanence and uncertainty. According to various qualitative researches, this mechanism is one of the major ways through which the host countries in the Gulf discriminate between the resident population and the migrants. By attaching certain stereotypes to certain nationalities or by reserving certain occupations for certain nationalities, the Gulf states create the other. Furthermore, the process of migration, that is the kafala regime, is another way through which migrant workers in the Gulf are marginalized and their freedoms are limited. So the kafala system is basically a mechanism through which a kafil or a sponsor assumes legal and economic responsibility of the migrant. The potential migrant in return gets kafalat or sponsorship necessary to obtain the residence permit. This practice is known as providing azad or free visa. This mechanism spikes up the total cost of migrant of intermediaries facilitating this system. So with COVID-19, host countries are likely to streamline the process of recruitment and reduce the practice of visa trading. So, for example, in February 2020, Saudi Gazette reported that Saudi Arabia is set to abolish the kafala system. Although there have been no official or unofficial kind of follow-ups on this this particular news report, still you kind of get a sense of the general attitude of the governments in the Gulf towards migrants, especially in the post-COVID scenario. Furthermore, Gulf states are likely to take active steps to curtail the presence of irregular migrant workers. So the general attitude of Gulf states towards migrants, UN report published in 2017, a majority of the Gulf countries reported that the level of migrant population in the countries is too high and they wish it to be reduced. So, and the scenario is of course likely to worsen in the post-COVID scenario, and we can see some changes already being taken place. So some countries like Kuwait and UAE have already started taking actions on this behalf. The recent ban on visa for Pakistanis in the UAE is one such example. And also the Kuwaiti parliament finalized the bill in September 2020 to reduce the number of expatriate workers and specify the number of workers needed by the country in various sectors. In May 2020, Prime Minister of Kuwait vowed to bring down the migrant population from 70% to 30%. In August 2020, Kuwait banned the conversion of all types of visas into residency permits. Although these conditions were relaxed in October 2020, still you can see that these certain steps very slowly, but definitely surely are being taken place in these Gulf states. In May, we're seeing foreign nationals in Kuwait. So showing that, these irregular workers are really not needed in the country and it's time for them to leave. Right? And similarly, Saudi Arabia also came up with a general. So apart from the government's attitude, there is also a presence of extremely negative attitude of the civil society towards the migrants. And various authors have kind of tried to document these negative attitudes or anti-migrant sentiments. They've noted the overt gestures in terms of symbolism expressed on t-shirts worn by some locals, saying UAE is full, go home, or expressing the Emirati kind of superiority by stating, I am local, I can cancel your visa at any point. So furthermore, Kuwaitis, researchers show that Kuwaitis are extremely uncomfortable in sharing neighborhoods with foreigners, justifying this discrimination with stereotypes such as, oh, the Westerners are party too loud, so it's very disturbing for us. So such sentiments have also penetrated the government discourse now. Recently, a high-ranking on the streets of Kuwait. In April 2020, a Kuwaiti actress said that the foreigners should either be sent back home or in the desert. So although there are studies that show that locals appreciate at some level, of course, appreciate the contribution of skilled and unskilled workers to the Gulf economies, they would still like to maintain a regulatory kind of role over the migrants. So by regulatory role, what I mean is they'd like to limit the number of migrants in their countries, and they would also like to limit the freedoms of these migrants in their countries. So apart from the discriminatory policy and general public attitude, a negative attitude towards migrants is also embedded within the urban structures of these Gulf countries. First and foremost, ownership of property is reserved only for the nationals. Majority concentrated in either industrial areas or dormitories near the workplaces. So the government takes an active role to prevent the spatial kind of proximity of these migrant workers. The government of Dubai evicted single men living in a family neighborhood. Similarly, when a construction company tried to house its employees in this apartment complex in Jumeirah area, which is a very kind of posh neighborhood of Dubai, the local municipality prevented that from happening. So adding to the marginalization of migrant workers is the public attitude towards the presence of these workers in public spaces. So research by Bristol and Sarah Hamza spaces in Gulf countries. So public spaces such as beaches, parks, and malls, because they face harassment by the police for being there, because of course there's a physical kind of separation because of how they look. They can easily be distinguished from the resident or the national population, right? So, and these people, when they're in these public spaces, they face harassment by the policemen, and also kind of stares and glares by the national population. So one of the interviewee went so far as to say that these spaces aren't for them because they're not public, and very casually that person had internalized this idea that they don't form the part of public of the Gulf countries, because they're not treated as such, right? So in order to kind of summarize and conclude, I would like to say that the government of Pakistan has a very pro and facilitative stance towards the migrants. Unlike other countries where migrants have faced trouble coming back, the government of Pakistan has been very facilitative. Whether adequate services have been provided to reintegrate these migrants is still, questionable and yet to be seen. But the policies are definitely there, and the positive kind of attitude is definitely there on part of the government of Pakistan. Secondly, we established that most migrants from Pakistan who migrate to the Gulf are low skilled. This occupational and geographical kind of characteristics of Pakistani migrants help explain the negative attitudes. The current scenario is likely to worsen with COVID-19, with some cases of violations and structural changes in the Gulf economies already being reported. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maham, for sharing your research work with us. Now the floor is open for question and answer. We will take 3 questions from the audience and 2 from the chat room. So if anyone have a question, they can raise their hand. Okay, Maham, we have a question for you. It's received from the audience that how COVID-19 will impact the cultural attitude toward the Pakistani workers residing in the Gulf countries.
Right. So generally, as I showed in my, should we wait for other questions, or do you want me to answer one by one?
You can go ahead. You can answer one by one.
Okay, right. So as I showed in the presentation, like our research was focused then mostly on the Asians, but because uh, Pakistanis also form a huge kind of proportion of the unskilled workers in the Gulf economies, and there have been certain researches which show this negative kind of the prevalence of negative attitude towards these migrant workers in the Gulf. We can very safely assume that this attitude is going to worsen with in the post-COVID scenario, because firstly the Gulf economies are of course going to be really badly hit with this pandemic, right? So with limited resources, of course the first thing that happens is the xenophobia multiplies, right? So it'll be very safe to kind of predict that it's going to get worse. Yeah.
Okay, we have another question from the audience that you mentioned something about the unskilled worker in Pakistan, Pakistani unskilled worker in Gulf countries. So we want to know about the demand of Pakistani unskilled worker in Gulf countries. That what are the factors which directly affecting this demand? What do you see?
Right. So this kind of trend, particular trend of migration of unskilled workers from Pakistan to the Gulf economy started, of course, in the 1970s with the oil price boom, right? And suddenly the Gulf economies have a lot of money, and they have extremely, elaborate developmental kind of plans, but they did not have the manpower to kind of implement these projects, right? And with that they started importing labor from various Asian countries, right? So that demand really comes from dates as far back as 1970s. And since then it has just continued, because the low skilled labor from these Asian countries, and especially from Pakistan, is cheap, right? And then secondly, the population of the Gulf economy is generally are very kind of skeptical of the nature of these jobs, and to be very frank, they look down upon these jobs. So it's very convenient for them to import labor uh, from countries like Pakistan.
We have question from Israr Ahmed. Which trade/professions will be in high demand in Gulf in near future?
Right. So there was this very interesting study that I came across, listing down the top 10 kind of professions which will see a rise in demand. And it was those top 10 professions, almost all of them belong to the services sector. So for example, there was, in the top 2 or 3 occupations was the salon kind of industry, the beauty industry. So definitely we're going to see a rise in that. And yeah, so services economy mostly.
Sure. I have one more question for you. Like in your presentation, you have mentioned that Pakistani government is very like positive toward the reintegration. They are welcoming them now. Do you see like Pakistan have the adequate infrastructure and sufficiently reintegrate these migrants worker within the economy, especially
Right.
looking into the economic crisis we do have right now? Can you like share your thoughts that how it will affect the migration perception as a whole in Pakistan?
Definitely. Thank you, Nadia. This is a very interesting question and a very difficult one to answer, because researches is by Dr. Dia Marif especially have shown that Pakistan does not have the adequate infrastructure to house or to reintegrate these migrant workers, because in order to fully reintegrate these workers there needs to be a very elaborate kind of scheme, right? Number one is that to provide them employment. Second is to provide them with either some form of capital that they can use in order to start up their small businesses, or at a very kind of personal or household level, the kind of cultural reintegration of these workers. Because for these households, the labor sending households, what the labor represents is, just like the Pakistani government, the greatest kind of asset. And we have a lot of, movies, shows showing that these migrant workers are really kind of exploited by these families. They're viewed as these people who are going out, living in really lavish kind of lifestyles and sending money back home. So essentially, for these households, these individuals become the cash cows, right? So in order to reintegrate those people, so the role, ekdam se wo role that, suddenly that role is shifting from, being the provider. Now the migrant worker will have to be the, quote unquote burden on that household for at least temporarily, right? So these are some of the things that, we need to consider when we're talking about return migration. And although governments, government of Pakistan is taking steps in this regard, so like there is more and more awareness of the issues faced by return migrants. I don't think we have an adequate kind of institutional framework or the infrastructure in order to reintegrate these return migrants.
Thank you, ma'am, for your elaborate response. Now we have like questions are pouring in. We have one more question. Under the prevailing COVID-19 policies across the world, since we have seen quite kind of rapid change in the policies, how do you see it will impact the Pakistani migrant workers in the countries? Like from your presentation, you have quoted that UAE has like put some restrictions on new visas, and also like Kuwait government, they are kind of offering amnesty schemes for undocumented workers. So how do you see this?
Right. So Nadia, what I presented in my presentation was mostly the political and the kind of economic factors that are going to affect the migration process from Pakistan to the Gulf. But we look into in our research, Dr. Nasir and I are also, we're looking at the non-economic factors that are going to affect the migration process, right? So number one being the kafala system, and I went into some length over it, so I won't go into it again. But then comes the role of friends and families, or the agents and sub-agents, right? And this is likely to change in the post-COVID scenario, because the government is, we can safely predict that they're going to have a tighter control over who is coming to their country, right? So this elaborate network of friends, families, and agents are likely to be kind of surveilled by the government, and their operations are likely to be strictly circumscribed by the government, right? So in that sense, and also the friends and families who, initially before the pandemic had a very safe kind of position in the Gulf, now their position also is very questionable. So whether they have the capacity to invite or to temporarily at least house the potential migrant is very questionable, and is going to be very questionable in the post-COVID scenario, right? And then we'll also look at the competitiveness of COVID-free workers, and this kind of the kind of geographical aspect to it. So certain states have been very good at tackling the tackling with the pandemic and controlling the pandemic, right? So workers from those countries are likely to be, more in demand in the Gulf now, right? Because quote unquote they're going to be healthy or virus free. So these are some of the non-economic factors that are definitely going to affect and control the migration from Pakistan to the Gulf.
Thank you, Maham. The last question we have from the audience is, work from home arrangements now largely in place under the COVID situation in which we are going through, it will prevail for such a long period of time, and there will be any change in demand for the white collar jobs in Gulf. Do you see any change in this regard?
So I can So, because there have been no kind of official researches or no official or no news reports on this behalf, I can tell from very kind of informal research that I've conducted based on, my contacts in the Gulf. And the idea is that their situation is extremely uncertain, right? And they're feeling this pressure that they might be fired or they might be asked to go on leave, their visas might not be renewed. And these are all based on rumors, right? They have bases or no directed companies, but there's definitely a paranoia that was now.
Thank you, ma'am. I think this is it. Rest of the questions we will send to the speaker to address bilaterally. Kindly leave your name, organization, and email address with us. We will forward it to Maham to respond accordingly.
Perfect.
Thank you so much, Maham. It has been wonderful having you with us. If we receive more questions from the participant, we will be definitely forwarding it to you.
Perfect. Okay.
It's now time to move forward to our next session. Javeria Sultan, my colleague from Migrant Resource Centre, Lahore, will be moderating the next session. Now the floor is yours, Javeria. You can unmute yourself.
Right. So again, thank you very much, Nadia, for giving me the floor. And thank you, Maham, for the wonderful presentation. Our next esteemed speaker is Dr. Nasir Iqbal, Dean Faculty of Social Sciences, Pakistan Institute of Development Economics, Islamabad. Dr. Nasir has worked in trade, governance, development, design, and implementation of many social protection programs. While contributing actively to the leading social protection program, Dr. Iqbal has had the opportunity to work directly with the World Bank, Asian Development Bank, DFID, and ILO. He has produced numerous research articles published in well-reputed national and international journals, policy briefs, research projects, and reports. Today, he's going to talk about irregular Pakistani migrants surviving in the wake of COVID-19. Now, I would request Dr. Nasir to kindly open his mic. You have 20 minutes of presentation time and 10 minutes of Q&A. And your audience, you're requested to post questions with your name, organized, and email. Floor is yours, Dr. Nasir.
The early session discussion was wonderful, especially related to the COVID situation and the situation of workers that they are facing. And in the introductory session, it was very nice that they raised the question of the integration of the informal worker. Basically, if we look into the job nature of our worker, it is very well evident that the most are worker, either they are going through a legal channel or to some extent and irregular ways. Most of them are absorbed or placed in a very informal setting in the destination countries. So this raises a huge concern for the safety and economic as well as social well-being of the migrant worker, and especially if we talk about the irregular migrant worker, then the issue of this health and social well-being is like a more prominent and more concerning thing. So with this background, I am looking for on this presentation how these irregular migrant workers basically survive in this very uncertain and pandemic situation where everyone knows there is a lockdown and some other stuff. So this is the background of my slide. So I'll try to explain a bit about the motivation, then the how and the nature of the irregular migrant worker, and then the key findings and how we can support these irregular migrant workers, especially in the upcoming second wave of this COVID situation. So the question is why we are looking for the irregular migrant workers. So if we look into the very well documented economic phenomena of migration, development, and security nexus, then the situation of basically COVID-19, the pandemic, and the lockdown, whatever you call it, huge implication for irregular migrant workers, especially about their health and as well as economic vulnerabilities. As I earlier said, the most of these workers basically either absorbed in the informal sector or residing with the very crowded places. So hence this give us an idea how they survive within this COVID situation. Given this background, the objective is to explore the factor that push these workers to use or adopt irregular migration channel to go into the destination country, and in what way those who actually manage to migrate illegally survives socially and economically in the wake of COVID-19, and what adversities the pandemic has stuck on them. So before going ahead, most of you people know what's the definition of this irregular migrant worker. So there are two terms like the informal migrant worker or the illegal migrant worker or irregular migrant worker. So these are the definition is over there. So why the Pakistan case is very interesting to basically look into this phenomena of irregular migration worker. So if we look into the regular migration pattern, then it is evident that over the last 5 decades, around 11 million people have migrated officially to various destination countries, including the most favorite, like the destination is your GCC countries. But the graph clearly shows the trend of these legal migrant worker in the wake of this COVID-19. So there is like a sudden drop in the regular migrant outflow from Pakistan to these destination countries. This is the one phenomenon, the one. But if we look into the other part of this whole migration that I'm focusing is the irregular migration. So there is a massive irregular migration from Pakistan to Europe, and as statistics show that the like around 7,000 migrant workers are deported from EU in 2017. Similarly, on average basis, Iran deported around 20,000 migrant workers every year, and Turkey almost have like 10,000 people every year. So these are the people those actually try to cross the border by using various channel, like either to use the Iran-Turkey route or any other land route to go into the destination country. So in some cases, if they are actually succeeded to cross all this stuff and eventually landed in the destination country, then the question is how they survive in tough situation. With the objective to learn about their behavior, their protection system, and the saving pattern in term of in this COVID situation, we conducted a descriptive study based on the interviews with the irregular migrant workers settled in Germany, UK, US, Canada, and Greece. So we try to pick a few cases and conducted an online interviews with these people, try to see what type of protection system that they have, how they survive, what are the legal challenges that they are facing, what are the economic issues that they have in the destination countries, how the community, basically the social capital, facilitated them, how the exponential increase in the social protection system basically facilitated them. So we start with the first question: why they opt this channel of illegal migration? So the answer was we divided in three different factors. One is like the broader context of the country where there is a high population growth, social disintegration, environmental disorder, and economic reintegration. So these are the broad macro level indicators that they feel could be the source of this illegal migrant worker. Then the other important issue that if we talk about the individual behavior in terms of opting the path of this illegal migrant, the migration system, the economic status in the home country, the level of employment, the employment opportunity that they have, and the gap between the demand and supply of the labor forces within the country, social conflict, and the economic opportunity. So these are the basically proximate factors that compel them to use this the route for the illegal migrant workers. And again, on the last, that is the sustaining factor, especially networking, and then the knowledge flow. And in earlier presentation, there was one question in the wake of this COVID and the idea of this e-system. Basically, it changed the entire dynamics of this migration. So it might have a huge implication in the coming years, because the freelancing opportunities create a lot of opportunities for these workers if they are really have some sort of skill to work in the home country. So we asked various questions to these respondents. So there were one interesting finding, this basically that link with the conflict of the country. So one of the respondents from the KP, he said there was a conflict within the family, so I tried to survive myself by opting this illegal route to go to the other countries. And basically my family member and friend in the destination country facilitated me in terms of supporting me to cross this barrier of the illegal migrant workers. So these are the push factors that compel them to go out of the migrant worker. Now, coming to the impact of this COVID-19 situation, the respondent clearly said there is a huge job loss. Basically, as earlier said, most of them are involved in the very informal sector, like the hoteling and the service deliveries, and also the day-to-day the economic opportunities. But if there is a lockdown, if there is a like complete ban on the tourism activity, so this create a huge issue for them, and there is a massive job loss for the irregular migrant workers. Another most important issue of this, the legality versus the illegal status of the migrant worker residing in the destination country. One of the asylum seeker from Germany said that, so they have some sort of document that give them some sort of support to not go out because they are not deported, but that doesn't provide them a complete protection to avail some sort of economic opportunities to this, the social protection that are provided by them. And then the inclusiveness, non-inclusiveness of the social security schemes. As earlier I said, to some extent, the legal migrant worker have some support from the government and other networks to be facilitated in terms of like giving them some like the subsistence income to survive. But the all type of illegal migrant or irregular migrant worker are excluded from those systems. And then other is if even there is a chances to get enrolled and get some sort of support from the local community or the government, there is a need to show your identification, with the fear that if I show my identification, I would be deported. That also compel them to hide themselves in the even with the no income and other stuff. Then we try to see how the government basically facilitate them and what are the role of informal communities working over there, how this social capital basically act as a supporting mechanism. So there was very interesting finding that an illegal migrant from Canada say, yes, there are informal systems such as Pakistani diaspora or the local civil society that raise fund and identify us and reaches out to us. But the question is, who are we? That's the main concern, that how can we be located to these people, those are living there in irregular pattern, because there is no information related to their residence and other stuff, and they are clubbed with the friend and other member in the, so it is also a difficulty. And again, the overall the Pakistani community and diaspora basically they facilitated them to survive with this COVID situation. So the social capital basically is one of the main social security that they use to survive within this COVID situation. No, based on the key finding and the analysis of the study, what we can recommend to look into the plight of these and to address the sentiment of the illegal migrant worker. The first, the key is the countries, including Pakistan, have like a migrant restraint in the overcrowded spaces due to the lack of resources to self-sustain themselves. In this situation, the origin and host country must relax the stringent conditionality of documentation, formal employment, and the legal status and work permit as a qualifying criteria for the recipient for such programs and packages. So the idea is the government in the host country should create a window for these people, at least for the given time period where the COVID prevail, and especially in the second wave that is like the more dangerous rather than the first wave. So they can give them some sort of relaxation in terms of documentation requirement to be enrolled as a legal migrant worker. So that could be a one-time like a permission to all these people to be part of the whole net that on based on the humanitarian basis also. So the second question is like the COVID situation basically disproportionate effect on the vulnerable poor. Because if you are a formal, you have an opportunity to get some sort of benefit. But if you are a irregular worker, then on the one hand, there is a complete closures in the economic activities, and on the other hand, there is no social support from the government. So all these should be considered, and these marginalized people should be mapped, and then they should be included in some sort of social protection system. And as earlier I said, the social capital is a key for the survival of these people. So then there is a need to create alliance between the state institution and civil society to devise socially responsive and contextual policies, at least to give them some sort of a support for a specific time period. And again, the last that we are thinking that the government should devise some sort of a mechanism to give some sort of relaxation across the border mobility, as the one of the asylum said. So this should be also considered. So I conclude my discussion that there is a need, in essence, the research proposes to deconstruct existing stringent legal and special barriers in literal and figurative context to ease the irregular migrant worker. Secondly, the study called for adopting a more collaborative and sectoral approach to include irregular migrant as a vulnerable poor in the host country's social security package. And the other issue that is related to the inclusion of these is the lack of data that is a main obstacle in identifying these irregular migrant workers. So the geographic and social mapping is basically critical. In this way, the local communities and also the NGOs, those are working for the welfare of the migrant worker, can play a pivotal role in terms of mapping these people. And as earlier said, the social capital and the networking can be an instrumental in targeting population for the mapping purpose. So with this, I conclude my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nasir Iqbal, for sharing your research study. Before we take a few questions from audience, we encourage all the participants to use our Twitter hashtag, that is MRC Pakistan. Please retweet with this hashtag so that the message on international migrants gets released out to all the audience widely. Coming to the questions, Dr. Nasir, during your presentation, you have mentioned that diaspora is playing a humanitarian role towards irregular migrants. As we know that it is a special situation, COVID-19. So when this COVID-19 phase is over, how do you see the transition towards these irregular migrants taking place, and the government policies to make them inclusive and sustainable part of the society?
Thank you so much. As earlier I said, so the non-inclusion of these irregular migrants is one of the key issues that we observed while interviewing these irregular migrant workers, and especially with the fear that they are deported if they show their identity to any channel in the host country. With this situation, and like in most of the EU countries, they have like a permanent feature. After few years, they use some sort of like a relaxation mechanism to include irregular migrant worker into the mainstream, either by giving them one-time chance to be enrolled in the legal system. I think that would be a way to include all these irregular migrant workers, because the new flow is basically stopped due to the various restriction across border mobility, and the pandemic situation put huge like a restriction on the outflow of these migrant workers. In this context, I think the host as well as the destination country should collaborate with each other in terms of finding a solution for inclusiveness of these people, and these can be modeled in using the previous the steps the destination country mainly take, like if it's a well-known phenomena in EU countries. So there are ways to give them a one-time relaxation to be included in the net.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nasir. From the audience, we are seeing some hands being raised. So we have Mohsin Ali, his hand is raised. So may I request Maria to unmute him and allow him to ask his question?
Assalamu alaikum everyone. I hope you're doing good, and I would like to thank everyone who participated and gave us a very, very informative session. I just want to add that how would we continue such kind of awareness campaign at the grassroots level? Like I'm from Gujarat, and this is very burning issue. This is very hot issue in Gujarat. Every second day we hear that somebody is going abroad, and someone is coming with a dead bodies and such kind of cases. So can we have a permanent campaign, permanent awareness campaign at the grassroots level, so we're gonna stop such kind of incidents happening again and again? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very interesting question, and the most part of my study is basically based on the interviewing irregular migrant worker from the Gujarat. So I know the situation. As I said, why they migrate, that's the key question for us, and the factor that push them or induce them to migrate that need to be addressed. Like I said, if there is a massive unemployment, then what would be the alternative to survive? So definitely there is a risk factor, and if you are trading your the hunger and the unemployment with the risk factor of the life, then definitely it will push you. Then there is also other. This is the demonstration effect that you are belong to Gujarat, and you feel that despite they have a very tough situation in the destination country, but the remittances basically give like a welfare status in the host country. This create like a disharmony or the disconnection or some sort of an inducement to the other people living in the neighborhood. Look, the one of the person from this house is migrated, and now they have a very decent the livelihood status. So this gives them another indication. So the idea is to give them the skill, to give them the economic opportunities and the employment opportunities. That is the only way to keep these people to survive within the country. And look, if we look into the skill composition of the country, I have like finding a few days back, one of the international organization. And the skill composition mean that the skill, the labor is exported. And unfortunately, we are not part of those countries, those exported skilled labor. So this is one of the dilemma for us. Even if we look into the legal migration, that is mainly going to the GCC countries, 90% is from the labor class. So this is one of the exploitation that we are not looking into these dimensions. The government, especially the Ministry of Overseas, should look into these issues very vigilantly.
Thank you very much. So the next question that we have received is, you've talked about, it's for you, Dr. Nasir, you've talked about relaxing the policies for irregular migrant, but it has been observed during the pandemic, the governments are using closed approaches. Priority is given to safeguard their own nationals first. So far, do you think, has there been any government successful in safeguarding the irregular migrant or have facilitated them in any way?
So once we interviewed these people, so they clearly said that the only support that they had is the social capital support provided by either the Pakistani communities or the communities working over there for the welfare of the people. There is even not a single respondent said there is some sort of formal support from the government. That's why I emphasize on the role of our ministries, those are working in the destination countries. They must enforce some sort of mechanism and negotiate with the destination country. Look, these people are act as an asset for you people, because they are they worked on the low wages, and this is some sort of a cheap capital available to them. So they have to be support these people in terms of addressing their vulnerabilities, especially health and economic vulnerability. So we should have to take this issue at the very highest level and also involve the global players. Those are working in the migration pattern and to facilitate the safe migration. And it would be one of the part of SDGs. We should, and the government should involve all stakeholders in terms of minimizing this irregular migration and also the weak situation of these migrant workers.
Indeed, it should be the part of the policy. The next question that we have received is that building alliances between the state institution is key to diversify the social and contextual responsibility of government. But a lot of government do not support such initiatives of civil society organization. So what role do you see for academia and research institute that they can play to create awareness about the rights of or making the irregular migrants inclusive as a part of the overall package and promote positive narrative for this collaboration?
I think if we start with the SDG, so it will give us a very well starting point to look into the situation of this migration worker. And this would be a huge background support for all of us as academician or policymaker or advisor, whatever the role that we have. And it would be a role of these, the researcher, those are working on these, the migration issues, to highlight the importance of these migrant workers. Because if we look into the way differential between the national that they have and the migrant worker, that will give you a huge wage gap. And this wage gap basically is incentive for the destination country in terms of their economic profits. So we should have to highlight that these are not like a burden to you people or to your economy. These are basically a facilitator and also one of the important ingredient to your economy. If we exclude the migrant worker from the Middle East, then what would be the economic, the prospects of these countries? Nothing, because their national are not liable to do the dirty work. And our worker basically doing all type of dirty work for those people. And still we are the marginalized due to this impression that we are creating burden for them, and it is the responsibility of the and also the researcher and think tank and also the other NGOs to highlight the importance not only in terms of social but also in terms of economic opportunity that they are availing from us. So that would be like the role of us to highlight their economic contribution to their economic growth.
All right. The last question for you, Dr. Nasir, is do you think COVID-19 scenario will leave us globally with a different narrative, especially talking about illegal and irregular migrants?
Yes, as earlier said, there is a age of freelancing that would totally change the narrative of the mobility. So if this change the narrative of mobility, then the pandemic basically added so much in it. Just like we are sitting in our homes and making a very useful contribution through this e-learning and the e-processes. So that would be a one way to change the entire migration dynamics. Maybe in the future, there is no physical mobility of the migrant worker. They are sitting in their homes and they are performing well. So that could be a one way to think in the future how we can realign this the migration with the prosperity of the other countries. So we should have to think differently in the coming days and the years.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Nasir, for your time and presentation and sharing your research work. Now we would like to move on to our next speaker, Ms. Jennifer Forte. Ms. Jennifer Forte is a consultant with the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, specializing in migration and displacement. She has been conducting research on migration and displacement trends within, to, and from Pakistan, and working with Pakistan Red Crescent Society to establish their migration department, focusing on issues of under-documentation. Ms. Jennifer also researched about Afghan and Pakistani refugees who are in indefinite transit in Indonesia. Today, in her presentation, she will be sharing her research work with us on migration narrative from Southeast Asia with focus on Indonesia. Jennifer, now the floor is yours. You may share your presentation and open your mic as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much, Javeria and Nadia and everybody at Migration Resource Center for this fantastic event today. And I also want to say thank you so much to the two previous speakers. My presentation will fit in very nicely to this narrative as Ms. Maham started with regular labor migration, and then we moved to irregular labor migration. And now I will be speaking about refugees and irregular migrants in Southeast Asia, specifically in Indonesia. So first I will share about the refugee perspective and narrative in Indonesia. This is based on research conducted in conjunction with Chulalongkorn University in Thailand. And then I will talk about the work of the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement with regards to migration specifically in this region and this country. So first, just to give an overview about forced migration in Southeast Asia. For many in Asia and the Pacific region, migration and its consequences are daily parts of life. There are an estimated 88 million migrants in the Asia Pacific region. And it's also estimated that up to 40% of all migrants across the globe originate from here in the Asia region. Now this includes migrant workers, which have already been discussed today, climate migrants, refugees and asylum seekers, internally displaced people, and stateless people as well. UNHCR estimates that there are about 7.7 million people of concern just in the Asia Pacific region alone, including 3.5 million refugees and 1.9 million IDPs. And this is only those who are specifically registered with UNHCR. We know that there are likely many, many more. Now, specifically in Southeast Asia, I think there's a well-known issue regarding Rohingya refugees who are in Bangladesh. There's also a significant population in Thailand and Malaysia. Malaysia and Indonesia are also hosting these such refugees who are making secondary movements from Bangladesh. And then also Thailand is hosting hundreds of thousands of other refugees from Myanmar over the last several decades. Now, despite all of these refugees and migrants within the region, there are only 2 countries in ASEAN who have signed onto the refugee conventions, 2 countries being Cambodia and Timor-Leste. The rest leave it up to their own governments to do refugee status determinations, or they leave it to UNHCR to manage these things. And the result is that there is a hodgepodge of refugee policies within the region, ranging from the very, very strict, like Singapore and Hong Kong, who do immediately put any visa overstayers or asylum seekers immediately into immigration detention. This is on the strict end. Going all the way to the countries with quite porous borders like Thailand, Malaysia, and Indonesia, who have a lot of migrant flows, a lot of refugee flows going in and out of the countries. Now, specifically concerning Indonesia, this country is of particular interest to our region here, as the majority of refugees in Indonesia are coming from Pakistan and Afghanistan. There are also some other refugees from Somalia, Iraq, Sudan, various other countries, but the vast majority are indeed from here. Primarily, they are Hazara people originating from Ghazni province in Afghanistan or from Quetta, many of whom initially originated from Ghazni in Afghanistan as well. So they would be making secondary refugee movements over to Indonesia. Now, Indonesia itself was never the final destination intended for refugees who are there, but rather Australia was the intended country of destination for most refugees in the region. However, over the last decade or so, starting around 2011 and really culminating in 2014, Australian migration policies have been becoming more and more strict. They have done things like preventing refugee boats from arriving onto Australian shores. They have done what's called offshore processing, which means if you are seeking asylum, you do not do it on mainland Australia. And there have also been a series of campaigns in Afghanistan and Pakistan to discourage would-be refugees from making the journey from these areas over to Australia via Southeast Asia. In 2014, there was a major policy change called Operation Sovereign Borders, and this all completely halted the migration into Australia. The result was thousands of refugees who had previously been using Indonesia as a waypoint or as a brief transit stop of maybe a few days or maximum a few weeks, these thousands of people got stuck in what we would consider to be indefinite transit, unable to return back to Pakistan or Afghanistan because of security situations or personal reasons, and unable to make any further movements. They really became trapped in this type of limbo. At the time, around 2014, 2016, UNHCR was estimating that the waiting time for resettlement would be about 3 to 5 years. And the refugees who became trapped there found this to be quite challenging because the intention was just to be there for a few weeks. But over the course of the study conducted, the waiting time, the estimated waiting time for resettlement grew from 3 years to 5 years to 10 years. And then in 2017, UNHCR approached the refugee communities and said, unfortunately, you can expect up to 25 years of waiting time. So basically, it just closed the door on any possibility of moving out of Indonesia. This is particularly difficult because Indonesian policies dictate that refugees are not allowed to work. They are not allowed to earn any sort of money. They cannot go to school unless they can somehow become fluent in Bahasa Indonesia and gain sponsorship to attend a Indonesian government school, but this is quite rare. They're even prevented from doing meaningful volunteer work. So this was kind of a death sentence for these thousands and thousands of families that became trapped in limbo there. So I want to talk briefly about some of the drivers of migration that sent all of these Afghan and Pakistani families. Whereas the previous speakers have been speaking about labor migration and searching for economic opportunities, the refugees who are in Indonesia, by and large, are fleeing conflict and persecution, particularly those coming from Ghazni province in Afghanistan. They would be considered to be a persecuted minority there. They also face quite a lot of difficulty in certain parts of Pakistan. So because of their minority status religiously, they fled this type of persecution and discrimination. As I mentioned before, there's also quite a lot of secondary refugee movements. Refugees who originated in Afghanistan came over here to Pakistan, faced difficulties here and were not able to stick around, then went on these other movements. The general route that most of the refugees would be taking would be going from Ghazni or Quetta up to Islamabad or Karachi, going then to Thailand, Bangkok for transit, then going to Malaysia, and then taking a boat from Malaysia to Indonesia with the intention of taking a boat then to Christmas Island, which is an Australian territory relatively close to Indonesia. With this in mind, there were many, many different perceptions of the asylum journey, of the migration from Pakistan and Afghanistan over to Indonesia, ranging from the very positive to the extremely negative. We had about 50 people responding to this particular question on why they left and how was the journey. One boy said, well, you know, my school was blown up and the next day I had to leave. I did not even know where I was going. The family arranged a smuggler to just get him out of the country as soon as possible. And he had no idea what his destination country was. And when he ended up stuck in Indonesia, he did not even know what continent he was on. He had just left with the clothes on his back, and that was all. Another gentleman said that this was the best experience of his life, that he felt that he had been treated like a prince, and that it felt like he was on this amazing holiday because you know, the smugglers had facilitated every step of the way. They had made sure he was safe and protected. And the environment in Indonesia was so welcoming and beautiful that he felt that he was on this incredible journey. Bear in mind, that was probably 3 or 4 years ago, and he has not moved yet. So I'm sure his perception has changed a bit since then. But in terms of the initial journey, this was his feeling. And then notably, there was one woman who told me that being in Indonesia was like being stuck in a beautiful green hell. She said it was the most beautiful place that she was not able to move. She was not able to work. She was not able to see family anymore. And she felt that her entire life had ended. So in the face of this very long, indefinite transit, in the face of this limbo, being told that these people will spend the rest of their lives, for the communities, for the individuals to completely lose hope and to give up and to even consider returning back to the places that had sent them fleeing. However, there's an extremely notable community that has developed in Indonesia. This is, sorry, I should have mentioned before, this is about 4 hours south of Jakarta, up the side of a mountain. Chisara is a town of about 100,000 people, of which 5,000 are from Quetta and Ghazni. So they represent a significant portion of the population of this town, and their community development skills and their survival and thriving skills have made a huge impact on the local community there. So because they are so excluded socially, economically, academically, politically, they are completely outside of the purview of the government, these refugees decided they had to take matters into their own hands. Several years ago, a group of parents realized that, you know, in the face of this long transit, their children were not developing, and they needed to go to school. And since they were not allowed to go to Indonesian school, they had to start their own. So the first school in the area, the Chisara Refugee Learning Center, began with about 20 students, run by parents and concerned community members. Now, in 2020, there are more than 12 schools serving thousands of refugee students within that region and Jakarta itself, entirely run by the refugees themselves. They clean the buildings, they prepare the lesson plans, they deliver the teaching, they do all of the organization, they raise funds, they manage social media campaigns, they connect with foreign universities, foreign support organizations, and even now there has been an NGO that has been formed out of that initial school to help develop the community. From this photo here, you can see there's even a refugee karate center, which is run by a woman who was a Pakistani national karate champion in the early 2000s. She's now a refugee there, and her students are now regularly winning competitions with local Indonesians and earning their graduated belts. So basically, this refugee community has taken the most impossible situation and have turned it into an opportunity to develop and to thrive. And because of this, they have developed vast social capital and vast social networks, both within the local Indonesian community and beyond. Dr. Nasir was this social capital for irregular migrants to be able to survive in really adverse conditions, for example, COVID-19 right now. And this community in Chisara Bogor has done an incredible job of building this social capital so that they are able to develop in this most impossible situation. Now, part of that social capital that they have developed is within the Indonesian community itself. Now, initially, before the Australian policies changed and refugees were just coming in, making a brief stop and going on their way, the perception of refugees, of Afghans and Pakistanis from the local community was quite negative. They were seen as people who were just coming in and taking up space, not assimilating into the community and leaving. However, because of all of these community efforts that they have made, there has been a huge change within that community. I lived within this community a few times over the course of 2 years. And from 1 year to the next year, even I was able to see a dramatic difference in the local economy. So the first time I was there in Chisara, it's a small town in Indonesia, and facilities were quite basic. Everything was very, very basic there. The second time I visited 1 year later, it was quite apparent that there had been a significant change in the local economy. In the bazaar, when we would go to buy vegetables, Indonesian vendors could be heard speaking Farsi with the local community as well as with the refugees. The roads were more developed, the houses were more developed. And when I asked about this with the community leaders, they said, well, you know, refugees are not allowed to work, so they're not taking jobs, they're not taking income from the local community. However, they have to live, and they are supported by family members from outside or from NGOs. They are spending money and they are helping to develop our community. So economically, this has started to build a lot of goodwill within the local Indonesian community. And it's also meant that the government is not interfering with the lives of the refugees there, because they are now seen as a positive impact. Further to this, the community-led schools for the refugees have gained international renown, and the reputation has become so good because they are delivering high quality education supported by foreign NGOs. Now, local Indonesians are requesting access to the refugee schools. And so the whole community is really being seen as a positive impact on the local area. Now, internationally, the social capital has also been extending beyond Indonesian borders, beyond Pakistan, beyond Afghanistan. The NGO that came out of the initial school that I mentioned is based in Australia, and they have developed partnerships with several universities in Sydney, who now regularly send teachers to do capacity building with the refugee teachers in the refugee schools. And now there has been a great network established in Canada, where people are now able to get private sponsorship to leave Indonesia and become resettled in Canada. Now, all of this sounds wonderful, and it is wonderful, but of course, COVID-19 has had a devastating impact on this community, as it has with the rest of the world. The community, you know, they are quite used to the trauma of their previous lives, and so they have developed quite a bit of resilience. But as the entire world shut down, this meant that the support systems, the financial support systems that they had outside the country, have also shut down. Universities have had to adjust, schools have had to adjust, the entire world has had to adjust. And Indonesia itself is still a developing country. And the refugee community realized, well, nobody else is going to take responsibility for us. We are irregular here in this country. We are surviving and thriving on our own steam entirely. We cannot wait for the government to come in and tell us how to make it through this crisis. So the entire network of the schools, the community centers, the social entrepreneurship, the social initiatives, they all came together after the first 2 cases were reported in Indonesia, and they decided, we are going to be the leaders in this, and we're shutting everything down. So within 1 week, they shut down all operations with the idea that they would just wait and see what happened, reevaluate within 2 weeks. And of course, we all know what has happened with COVID-19. Within 2 weeks, everything in the world changed. So this community, particularly the schools, have gone through an enormous change, both in how they operate and in the overall narrative. So the teachers had to make major adjustments, and and they have all essentially become social workers. They set up all of these different communication cells so that they are able to communicate very quickly and efficiently with all of the families and the community members to make sure that everybody is safe, healthy, mentally stable during these very difficult times. And the network that they set up was so effective that they were able to conduct a community-wide study on the new and emerging needs of the community. This study was taken up by UNHCR, and for the first time, they are now receiving some small support financially from UNHCR, as it was revealed that their external support was no longer available. In addition to this, because of the social capital that they have built up within the local Indonesian community, they were able to coordinate with local officials for the funding and procurement and distribution of face masks, hand sanitizers, hand washing stations, and these sorts of things, to the extent where the local community and the refugee community were working together, and they were able to get all of these equipments before everybody else in the country because of their social cohesion, because of the strength of their network there.
Jennifer?
Yes? Oh, am I running out of time?
Yes, please.
Okay,
Yeah.
I will wrap it up in 1 minute. Thank
Okay.
you. Now, some of the other presenters spoke about instances of ill will and negative perceptions of migrants especially during COVID-19 times. However, I was really delighted to find that there's been no such instance of this within this community. In fact, the community bonds have gotten even stronger between the refugees and the local community because of their strong networks and their positive contributions to that community there. So just finally, I will briefly explain what my organization is doing globally and regionally with this. Now, the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement, as a neutral organization, we neither promote nor discourage migration in any form. Rather, we provide humanitarian support wherever migrants might be found, in countries of origin, like here in Afghanistan, countries of transit, like Indonesia, countries of destination, like Australia. Part of this involves a Restoring Family Links program, whereby migrants who have become lost or refugees who have become separated from their families, we help to reconnect them. And then specifically here in Pakistan, which is a country of transit and origin, we are now, with the Pakistan Red Crescent Society, we are now trying to support Afghan refugees during the COVID crisis, working together with the government, working together with other partners to provide some sort of financial support so that we're able to address these critical issues of secondary movements. This is something that is a new program for Pakistan Red Crescent Society, and we are very much hoping to have a positive impact on preventing further irregular movements across the globe, particularly during these very, very difficult times for everyone. I'm so sorry I've run out of time here, but I thank you so much for this audience. If you're interested in knowing more about this community in Chisara, you can see I've included a link here to the NGO. And I'm sure they would love to hear from people from across the globe. So I'm very happy to take any questions you might have. And thank you so much, Javeria.
Thank you very much, Jennifer, for such a wonderful presentation and giving us a bit different view of the irregular migrants or the refugees that are based in Indonesia. Now we will open the floor for question and answer sessions. I request all the participants, you may kindly leave your name, organization, and email with the question. And we also encourage all the participants to use our Twitter hashtag, that is MRC Pakistan, to retweet and mark International Migrants Day celebration. So Jennifer, the
first question that we have received is about the number of years of estimated waiting time. Estimated waiting time that UNHCR is now stating is 25 years. Initially, it was 2 years, 3 years, and 5 years, then 10 years, and now it is 25. So why this long time for them?
That's a great and really sad question, I have to say. There are many reasons for this, actually. First of all, global resettlement of refugees to third countries is quite low anyway. So it's already at a very low percentage, even for substantiated refugee cases. However, specifically from Indonesia, and for the Afghan and Pakistani refugees who are there were initially only 4 countries that UNHCR would be able to resettle them to. That's Canada, USA, New Zealand, and Australia. Australia became very, very closed. New Zealand, they are welcoming, but they can only take so many. And so the result is that the United States was the largest resettler of refugees, both from this population and globally. But as you recall, in 2017, there were many changes to the refugee resettlement regimes within the United States due to the administration's view on immigration. There was a moratorium put on any refugee resettlement, regardless of the country. That moratorium was, I believe, about 90 days. And then there were specific countries identified from which refugees would just not be allowed to be resettled. So the result of that was an outrageous, huge backlog. And I'm not sure if that's the only contributor to the 25 years, but I think all of those factors combined made for just a high unlikelihood. Now, there are some people who would be higher up on the list for resettlement, that being single mothers, people who are elderly or infirm. And the individuals that would be lowest on the resettlement list are single men or unaccompanied men. And there's a huge number of these unaccompanied men in Indonesia. And so for them, their chances are basically nothing to ever get resettled.
Thank you very much. We have a question from Maham Hameed. She's saying that it really gave us an insight into the power of social capital and humanitarian efforts and the continued importance of community life in the modern individualistic society. I'm curious about the nature of the property that this community has used rights to. For example, the schools, are they owned by state, NGOs, or the community itself?
That's a great question. And Maham, thank you so much for your presentation as well. I've used a lot of CIMRAD research in my own research, so I'm very grateful for all of your contributions. Now, regarding the property, this is very difficult. As in Indonesia, refugees are not allowed to own any property. So there are two things. The initial school building for the first community effort, this was funded by an Australian couple that were, I think the wife was working for the World Bank there at the time, and the husband helped to set up the NGO. But this had to be done through the local Indonesian town council, I guess you could say. And so the name on the lease of the building is an Indonesian community member. This is quite similar to how things work here in Pakistan as well. So refugees cannot own or rent their own properties here. They have to use the name of a local person. They need to use the CNIC of a local person. The same is the case in Indonesia. where they really have to rely on these social capital that they build up and the goodwill that they build up within the community.
Thank you, Jennifer. We are a bit running out of time, so I will ask the last question from Iman Fatima. She's asking, is the global governance feasible for migrants?
No. That's such a huge and complicated question. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, in Asia Pacific alone, there are more than 88 million migrants. There are very few countries that would be able to absorb this type of migrant flow, whether it's regular or irregular. And so the current system, no, I do not believe that it works. Particularly focusing on refugees, the resettlement system alone is so complicated. It's not just Indonesia that has a 25-year waiting list, shall we say. This is worldwide. People are protracted. They are stuck in transit here in Pakistan. You know, we have millions of refugees who have been here for multiple decades. So yeah, the short answer is no. And I think that's why we have organizations like your own, like CIMRAD, like the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement. You know, I think we are all trying to work together as best as we can to address some of the issues to address this.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. We will send the rest of the question to you directly so that you can reach out to the audience. It has been wonderful talking to you. Now, we would like to move on to our next session, which is presented by Nadia Kashif, our coordinator from Migrant Resource Centre, Lahore. She will share with us about the real-time experience and the learning from the clients that reach out to Migrant Resource Centre from various regions of Pakistan. She will talk about how perceptions are built and what role Migrant Resource Centre can play in formation of a reality-based narrative approach. So, Nadia, now the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Deveria. It has been wonderful to be with all of you to mark International Migrants Day. With this opportunity to present Migrant Resource Centre experience with their clients to this esteemed forum, let me first share with all of you that under the Silk Route project, at present 7 Migrant Resource Centres are operative in different countries who are working in strong collaboration with the relevant government ministries there. The Icmpd established Migrant Resource Centre Lahore, in which I'm working as a coordinator, is basically located in the largest populated province of Pakistan, Punjab, from where like most of the regular and irregular migration takes place. The topic of today's webinar is very interesting and relevant and in context to the migration framework. Since like large number of migrants, they have shared that they often marked by increased hatred, discrimination, and xenophobia. Therefore, this discussion is very vital and critical in host like origin and as well as in the destination countries in a modern global perspective. Today, like through this platform, I would like to share some of the MRC experience and learnings based on the request and the conversation with like hundreds and thousands of aspiring and outgoing and return migrants from different regions of Pakistan. We will also like try to share some facts based on the need assessment studies conducted by the third party in Pakistan in migration prone districts. If we see like migration from the lens of like labor migration in Pakistan, then our labor workforce have the opportunity to migrate legally to certain countries, especially like we'll say like GCC countries. We have also witnessed an increasing trend of labor migration from the past many years. I'll quote over here from the EOE statistics that in 2019, more than 625,000 labor migrants went abroad to work legally to more than 50 different destination countries. But the number of people who take this journey like through irregular means and who went through irregular means and go illegally is not recorded. It's not with us. Now let's move forward to look into the formation factors which lead the migration perception in Pakistan. Simply say that how migration is perceived in Pakistan. Here at the MRC Center, by interacting with the large number of intending migrants, especially in Pakistani youth, we have learned and developed an understanding that how migration is perceived by the different segment of society. Here we have seen that the public discourse and general perception to migrate, often it revolves around the success stories. These success stories of migrants, irrespective of legal or illegal means, are basically the hopes of the youth who visited us. Here, we have seen that we have experienced and also observed that young children of various low-income families, they are also kind of pressurizing their parents to invest to migrate for better opportunities. Even their parents are willing to pay the cost of migration by selling their assets in pursuit to invest in their better future. The youth who has approached Migrant Resource Centre, age ranging between 16 years to 30 years, usually perceive migration as a shortcut, an easy way to earn money and settle abroad. Here we would say that the wage difference in the home country like Pakistan, which is and also the wage they will get when they will land abroad, is basically fueling this perception, because we have seen a big gap in between the wages over here in Pakistan and abroad. In Pakistan, migrants and their families who left behind, they also enjoy and they earn more respect in the society. They kind of enjoy the superiority and they feel pride into this, that someone from their families is settled abroad. The clients who visited us, they probably say that someone from the family went abroad, either legally or illegally, it doesn't matter to them. We have also learned that settled migrants and their families, they usually do not quote the struggle part and the challenges they have faced during this migration process. It's kind of like making the picture very rosy for the youth to aspire to go abroad for a better future. We have also witnessed that our government is very supportive, and they are also migration is very well supported by the government as a platform for labor opportunities and the source of remittance. Lastly, the perceptions is also building through mainstream media, and it's also kind of playing an important role in building and changing mind. In Pakistan, we have seen that our more mainstream media mostly they present migrants and their families as a financially successful people and have more power and status within the society. This is also adding toward the prevailing migration perception within the Pakistani youth. Now let's take a look into the role of different agents and dominating factors that leading this migration perception from the lens of the clients who visited us. A need assessment study was also conducted by a third party in migration-prone areas of Pakistan. And from this assessment study, the feedback from roughly 3,000 respondents who reported and participated in it from all over the Pakistan, they showed that 48% of the respondents have reported they attained information from agents. 48% of them have directly got the information from the agents, and only 14% of them got the information from the recruitment agencies. These migration agents are basically, these, I would quote these fake agents are selling dreams. They are selling dreams and building perceptions in the minds of people, Pakistan, especially the youth. They are targeting the youth. This business of selling the dreams has become very lucrative over the period of time. People are ready to pay to fulfill their dreams. This is also fueling this overall process. So now let's talk about like who these dream sellers are and how they inspire those ambitious individuals who wants to go abroad. These agents could be anyone in your close circle, like it can be a recruitment agency, it can be a family or a friend who is already residing abroad. It can be an immigration consultant. Uh, any trustworthy community partner can be like play a role of an agent in this way. Usually, people see these agents as a job provider, and they look at as a source which can help them to migrate easily. Nowadays, we have like also experienced that we have also seen and observed, and it's also been reported by our clients that these agents are using mixed kind of technology-enabled tools. They are also like using the old methods. Use of social media is gaining very popularity in these days. In addition to those conventional methods like advertisement in the newspaper and TV channels, various WhatsApp groups are active in this regard. Facebook pages, fake job offer through email are quite a common. SMS messages, websites, and a different mode which has been used by these agents to attract those aspirant migrants, and they are developing perception in there. We have also like learned from the experience of our clients, especially from the returnees, that often these fake agents they attract potential migrants with catchy phrases. They use kind of success taglines into it. Some of them we have listened, and I would like to share with all of you that a message from a friend, an extended family member residing abroad should be like, just get in here, I'll take care of the rest. It can ignite the hope of and also build perception in the mind of someone who is living in Pakistan in difficult situation. Attacked kind line, I will say attack of kind of building trust. Agent also say a lot of time that pay when you reach, and this is exactly the financially crunch person need to hear. So they are kind of playing with their emotions too. Everything we have also like heard that everything has been managed. You are special for us. Your travel will be VIP. This is the general feedback which we have received from unsuccessful migrants who approached us. And they have also shared that actually, when they went into that journey, it was very risky and eye-opening for them. It's never been like this. It's not an easy journey. Here we would also like see that in Pakistan, the belief system is also playing a role in building the perceptions. People generally like to take risk by saying this, that leave everything to Allah. So we at MRC, we have like learned and we have like seen that there are many reasons of this exploitation, and the basic reason of this exploitation by the fake agent is insufficient information and lack of awareness about the legal ways to migrate. So now moving to the next slide to explore the predicament faced by the Pakistani immigrants during the course of migration. By interacting with the number of migrants and returnees, we have observed that we have learned from their experiences and feedback that most of the immigrants face a lot of difficulties throughout this migration process. It normally doesn't come on the surface very often, like people won't talk about it very commonly. Feedback from the need assessment study conducted in the migration prone areas of Pakistan, it also revealed the fact that proper information was not given to the Pakistani immigrants throughout the process of migration. Here, few of the predicaments I'm going to share with you, like insufficient pre-planning, which lead to deceit by agent, insufficient information about the work, health facilities, rights and benefits, and the working condition. Only limited pre-departure and almost like no access to post-arrival orientation for Pakistani immigrant is one of the major problems in early settlement phase of Pakistani migrants. Outgoing migrants, they are often not aware of the role, services, and support mechanism provided in country of origin and in destination. So awareness is required on that part too. Here I would like to share in that government of Pakistan, they have focused now on providing the facility for betterment of Pakistani labor workers. There are lots of initiatives have been taken in recent times, and facilities have been put in place by the government of Pakistan for migrants within Pakistan as well as the destination countries. But unfortunately, people are not much aware about these available facilities. We at a Migrant Resource Center, we are kind of helping people to know these facilities. We get them connecting with we get those like who are living abroad or who are residing within country to these facilities, how to avail them. We guide them that these facilities are available for you. You can get benefit out of it. There are several clients who have contacted MRC from abroad with their problems, and we have like helped them in connecting with the relevant government provided facilities like community welfare attachés and overseas employment for foundation in order to resolve their issues. Pakistani immigrants, they often find it like difficult to adjust in the destination countries due to the social, cultural differences and language barrier too. It has also been shared by many of the clients that migrants often face racism and discrimination in destination countries, and they are treated as a threat over there. Now let's move toward MRC, that how we can play a role in correcting this perception and building positive migration narratives in the mind of intending and potential migrants. Unfortunately, we have observed that the true picture and the ground realities of the legal and irregular migration process are not well presented. Usually when people talk about migration, it is focused on the end results and the achievement. The struggle part in between and the issues faced by the people during the migration process, it's badly missing and ignored from the available pool of information for the aspirant migrants. This Icmpd established Migrant Resource Centre in collaboration with the government stakeholder like Ministry of Overseas Pakistani and Human Resource Development and Labour and Human Resource Department, Government of Punjab. We are kind of playing a role in shaping the reality-based migration narrative by providing with the right information to the aspirant migrants. We are working to align this perception, basically filling the gaps for the betterment of Pakistani migrants and building the positive migration narrative in their minds. We are providing the relevant and timely information, which is helping in building the trust of the community. More and more clients have started approaching to our centers to get the authentic information for their migration related inquiries. MRCs also they have taken many initiatives to promote balanced migration narrative by working with different stakeholders within the community who are already in place within the community. Like MRC Pakistan has signed more than 20 MOUs with different organizations for awareness raising. We are focusing on social media for disseminating valuable migration related information to reach out large number of audience, particularly like we are targeting Pakistani youth in this regard. In addition to the different medium like SMS campaign, hotline service, our WhatsApp counseling and volunteer groups through different community-based organizations are made active for providing information and sharing information with the masses. Next slide. Next slide, please. Here, different lots of short video messages for the migrant and has also been developed and shared on different platforms for Pakistani youth to make them aware about the safe options to migrate and avoid taking risk of irregular migration. These video messages help correcting the wrong perceptions about the migration in Pakistan. We have tried to develop customized and easy to understand content in the local language like Urdu as well for better understanding of the message. We are launching radio campaigns. We have currently working on launching local cable campaign and a rickshaw advertisement campaign for reaching out to the masses in migration prone district. We have also at Migrant Resource Center, we have also arranged a community organization. It's a kind of an ongoing initiative for us to promote migration awareness among Pakistanis in building positive migration narrative through trust building and personal outreach to the communities, to the migration communities. MRC is doing its best effort in awareness of migration for all sectors of society. In the end, I would now like to say that both origin and destination should take concrete step in the right direction by promoting, make this world more inclusive and better place to live for everyone. Thank you. If you have any question, you may please ask. So this was about our contribution from the Migrant Resource Centre project. Now moving toward the end of our webinar, I would like to invite Ms. Isabel, our project manager, Migrant Resource Centre, Icmpd. She is joining us from the conference and present votes of thanks and closing remarks. The floor is yours, Isabel.
Thank you very much, Nadia. It's been a pleasure attending this conference, seeing so many interesting contributions from research done in Pakistan, from the different institutions, and especially thank you to our panelists, to Maham, to Dr. Nasir, and to Jeff for contributing to this conference. I would like to underline, I think a common denominator in the contributions today was that we saw, especially in 2020, with the COVID pandemic, we've seen the resilience of migrants. Migration, as also answered in a very difficult question on whether there can be global governance for migration. Migration is an inherent part of human society, and we see the magnitude of the number of migrants all around the world, and especially also from Pakistan. I think during the COVID pandemic, we've especially also seen the resilience of Pakistani migrants, with both the support that was provided by the government, with what we heard earlier, with over 90,000 overseas Pakistanis that were repatriated from April to June by the Pakistani government, with the increase in remittances. The highest ever remittances were sent by overseas Pakistanis to their families to support them in this crisis in, I think, July and August this year. And we've seen in terms of migration narratives that, yes, crises often also turn the narratives of migration, the perceptions of people, of migrants, into a negative one, into one that wants to protect their own and sees then migrants as the foreigners. But we've also seen the other side, that at community level, in a smaller setting, you see the contributions that migrants make in a community, and that communities then take advantage of that additional force, of that additional resource that are provided to them through the experience that bring to the communities. And I think that was a really good example by Jennifer on how this was perceived and is being seen in Indonesia. The Pakistani government, we've heard that earlier also, and we've also seen the contribution by the additional Secretary of Labour, Punjab, that they pay a lot of attention and a lot of, they see the contributions done by overseas Pakistanis, and it's something that is very much valued. I think it was mentioned that they are seen as the greatest assets for Pakistan and for the Pakistani economy, and to support Pakistan in this crisis that we all currently going through, but also that hits so many Pakistani families. And here also the policy, the immigration and welfare policy for overseas Pakistanis was mentioned, which was actually supported by Icmpd in the development with the Pakistani government, because the government of Pakistan has seen how much more support is needed to encourage legal and safe migration, to support overseas Pakistanis, to strengthen the embassies and community welfare attaches that are abroad, that support the Pakistani communities that are outside of Pakistan. And this policy is one step towards putting the strategic framework in place for the government to implement concrete actions. One of these concrete actions is the Migrant Resource Centre. That is something that has was a very innovative way of reaching out to communities. We heard just from Nadia now how this is being done and the sort of narratives that we hear from that. The Migrant Resource Centers in Islamabad and Lahore are currently also going at community level in Punjab, in migration-prone areas, in order to have these conversations on the dangers of irregular migration. As we've also heard by Dr. Nasir on the studies being done now, we've also seen an increase in irregular migrants because there are so little opportunities for safe and legal migration right now for Pakistani migrants during this COVID pandemic and the closure of many borders. So fake agents are taking advantage of that. And this is something where we as a community, as the government of Pakistan, want to actively work against these wrong narratives, these wrong stories of what irregular migration brings to families. So yes, I hope that I tried to cover many of the points that were raised by our panelists, and I would like to thank the panelists once more. I would like to thank Nadia and Juwaria and the whole MRC team for all the hard work that you've been putting into both raising awareness on migration, also during the COVID pandemic, as well as on organizing this very interesting conference. And I would like to thank all of the participants for your active participation, for all of the questions. We look forward to gathering all of this in a report and then also sharing that with you. So thank you from my side, and thank you also to Nadia for an excellent time management. It's almost 2 o'clock, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Isabel. Thank you, everyone. It has been wonderful getting engaged with all of you in this webinar. It's a Friday and almost like you all are already leaving for Friday prayers. So I formally conclude this conference. Wishing you all a very nice weekend, and thank you so much for your active participation. Take care. Allah Hafiz.
Thank you.